Welcome to the XY Advisor Podcast, a global community of financial advisors sharing and learning with one another to drive the positive evolution of financial advice. To get involved, go to xyadvisor.com or simply download the XY Advisor app.
This podcast is proudly brought to you by Astute Wheel. Provide valuable, goals-based advice using simple-to-use online client data collection tools, have values and goals discussions, conduct live modelling, produce file notes, strategy papers, SOAs, and automate compliance.
Welcome back to the XY Advisor Podcast, and we are up to episode 3 of our 6-part series on how we actually go about talking to our clients and eliciting their hopes, dreams, goals and aspirations when it comes to values and goal setting for financial planning. In this episode, we are really looking at that discovery meeting process and understanding what are the right questions you can ask and how we can go about hosting that discovery meeting to really help our clients understand what their hopes, dreams, goals and aspirations are that may not necessarily be the standard, I want to do the same thing my parents did, for example. So today, of course, first off the rank, we're joined by Naomi. Hello, Naomi. How are you?
I'm fabulous. Thank you, Fraser. Thanks for having me on the show again.
Thank you. Thank you for turning up. Now, tell us about your discovery meeting process. We've sort of been through the process. You mentioned before that you've gathered the data before this meeting for the clients before they come in. So tell us about how that meeting is structured for you. What happens when the whole thing from maybe let's start right from the beginning of that meeting. How people are then confirmed to turn up or where they turn up to.
Okay, so we use Calendly to book people into meetings, and that sends out an automated reminder. So we're finding that to be very effective in ensuring people turn up. And you can have different ways of inviting people to a meeting, whether in person, via Zoom, over the phone. And so for initial meetings with clients, our preference is in person, but of course that's not possible with lockdowns at the moment. So we're very much Zoom-based. Which can be quite effective because you've still got that visual with that person.
Fantastic. And tell us about this meeting structure. Do you have an agenda as such for this meeting?
Yeah, look, I think the agenda is really stepping through the information and confirming that information. But then it's also talking around the goals. And the goals section of any meeting is going to be much more fluid. It's not really that defined. I think the end goal from my perspective is to help people really get clarity around the goals that they have. So really turning those goals into much more structured objectives, from which we as a financial advisor can then actually work from. Because, you might have a goal that says, I want to retire at 65. Well, what's that retirement actually going to look like? How much income do you need? How much capital do you need? And if you're sitting here at 35 years of age, that's, a good 30 years away. You don't necessarily have those answers. And so it's our job, our role really to try and draw out a picture of that retirement and what that lifestyle might look like, and then bringing it back to today and say, well, perhaps your objective might be something like this.
And tell us about those questions. So you're with a client and, they sort of give you, and let's face it, right? Clients don't really know what their goals and objectives are when they first came in. They mention things and you've sort of got to read between the lines a lot of spaces and just sort of ask deeper questions. Tell us about all the questioning type techniques you use.
I guess for me, I find that because I've had so many years in this industry, it's become quite intuitive, and the kind of questions I'm asking. And I already kind of have a feel for where I want to take them in terms of getting the answers that I'm looking for. And so, look, it's a lot of open-ended questions, and what does that mean to you? And why is that important to you? And, if that's where you want to be, why is it that you want to be there? Just very open-ended, getting them to really think about why it is they're wanting to have that particular goal and what that means to them.
Yeah, to me, even though you're not staging this, there is sort of the higher level, value, goal, purpose, not goal, but value and purpose type conversations first, higher level, before chunking down into more specific questioning around the quantifiable features of a goal, how much, by when, those sorts of things.
Yes.
And so when you do that, is there a process as you go through, then you have to start looking at prioritizing those goals?
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes the priorities are really evident because it's brought on by, as we've previously talked about, by a specific event, and that specific event is driving the priorities of the goals. Other times it's not as clear cut, or there's conflict between the goals. It's like, well, yes, you want to achieve goal A, but you can't then also achieve goal B because of your financial circumstance. And so it's a matter then of, talking through the priorities of those goals, and what becomes more important than something else, and then talking through perhaps some sacrifices. And people don't like, people want to have their cake and eat it too. And so it's about bringing a level of reality to the situation and saying, look, if you want to get to goal A, and therefore you may not be able to achieve goal B now, but we can put something in place that will lead you towards being able to achieve goal B at a certain point down the track. And so, helping people to prioritize what's most important.
During that very first meeting, though, is some of the idea not to actually put too many parameters around these goals, and I guess the modelling would come after that you go away and do post that meeting, and then start looking at the modelling, whether that's actually doable or not doable, and then having to come back and have these conversations, which I probably think we'll get to in the next episode. But just on that goal, the idea of finding out what somebody's goals and hopes and dreams and aspirations might be. How many do you look at thinking, in my opinion, there's sort of the idea of, there's the big ones, but then there might be a whole lot of smaller ones that we can start thinking in, shorter term ones, rather than just only having one sort of big goal. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I always talk to people about needing to focus on the different areas of life and through different time horizons. And absolutely, you've got to have your short-term focused goals where, that helps drive you to keep moving forward, right? I want to buy a car in 2 years' time because of X, Y, and Z reason. Or, I want to have X amount in emergency funding or savings or what have you. They're shorter-term goals. In my mind, the risk insurance packaging is all very much set it up in the right now, today, short term, and keep funding that through. And then you've got medium term goals. Some people say, look, I don't want to be working until I'm 65 and can access my superannuation. I want to be able to get to it when I'm like maybe 50. And so you're going to have a much more medium term goals that fit within a shorter time horizon and doesn't look all the way out to retirement. And then, of course, your long-term goals of retirement.
So in this first discovery meeting, are you just primarily looking at the idea of just trying to get all those goals out of their head?
Generally, yes. So most people already before that discovery meeting have flagged a whole bunch of things that are important to them, and they're very broad-based and just basic kind of, I want to buy a car, I want a comfortable retirement, I want to buy, I want an investment property, I want this, I want that. And so you've already got this full list of stuff. And then you have to kind of work through that with them, prioritize them, chunk them into the short, medium and long-term buckets and really give some clarity around what it is they're trying to achieve, and then therefore where do you start in terms of being able to help them tick the boxes to achieving those goals.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I also find that it's probably very easy for for planners to go along the concept of I need to find a goal that's got calculations requirements and a strategy that I can help you achieve that. Otherwise, I don't feel as valuable to you as others. But I also think that people have goals that don't necessarily always include financial aspect or financial strategy requirements.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find that a struggle for myself, where I've had some really wonderful conversations with people, and, because I think I've got the background that I have, I do want to help people, and it's not always based around numbers. There are, conversations that I've had where I've helped them resolve a situation or allowed them to make a different decision around something towards a particular goal that I haven't had to do any modelling for, and I haven't had to put something, in place like an investment or what have you, because it's nothing to do with that. And I hope people value that about what I can deliver and bring to the table in conversation. And then there might be strategic advice around a particular event and scenario where you are doing a bunch of modelling, but then it's not in their mind or in their interest or in their desire to actually have an ongoing advice relationship with you. And so you're just providing event advice, which is challenging for the business model that we have. And so it's not something that I really want to seek out in terms of clients. But at the same time, I don't necessarily want to turn people away when I can, provide them with that strategic advice and that modelling.
Yeah, fair enough. And what about when, I guess you probably have seen this a few times, when people just looking for permission to go and do the thing. It might be what you think might be feeling minor or not so much, but maybe they can afford it, but they just don't want to go and reach out and take the plunge, and then they come into you and they're looking for just for the tick of okay.
Yeah, it's interesting because on the one hand, it might be something that, absolutely, you think, man, just go and do that. I give you that permission as a professional expert. Here's my opinion. The thing you've come up with is amazing. And, and I've actually had conversations like that recently where I'm like, oh my God, I'm so proud of you. You've got to go do it. Just take the plunge, spend the money, or, make that investment, whatever it might be. This is your path. I'm here to support your journey. And as a professional, it's cool to go ahead and do that. And on the flip side, then I've also had people come to me and say, I'm thinking about doing this, or I want to do that. What are your thoughts around it? I'm like, that's such a bad idea.
Emotionally, that sounds amazing. Yeah. Logically, no, don't do that.
Yeah. And,
oh dear.
And yet you don't want to crush people's hopes and dreams, but you also need to, I guess, so give them a frame of reference. Here's why I think this isn't the best thing for you, and try and soften the blow that what they're thinking about doing isn't going to necessarily work out for the best for them, and perhaps then maybe shift the conversation to alternatives that might actually be more in their interest.
Wonderful. Thank you, Naomi. Let's catch you in the next episode when we really start looking about, talking about those goals and the conversations around calculations and housing them and where to keep them so that the clients can keep an eye on them. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks, Fraser. See you then.
Welcome back, Craig Buntain. We are talking about all things to do with the Discovery Meeting. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Fraser. Nice to be here.
Now, tell us about your Discovery Meeting. How do you set it out? What sort of time? Well, let's start with the time. How long do you give it?
I diarise it for about 90 minutes. They go somewhere between 60 minutes and 2 hours, depending predominantly on how much education, how much client education I'm providing. It's pretty. I have a pretty set out meeting, so there is an agenda that I furnish to the client quite quickly. So initially, we do all those rapport establishing things that I'm sure everybody does in their first meeting, and have a bit of small talk, and then the agenda, effectively, I go through the steps with that as a first point when we start talking seriously about what they're there for, and the idea of that is just to keep me on track. I have been guilty of waffling myself and letting clients waffle as well in the past. So the agenda really kind of helps me stick to the timeframes that I've set aside. And so that agenda, the first step in that is tell us your story. I want to hear what I haven't already received back from the mini fact find, because the mini fact find is generally numbers with a few objectives in it. What I want to hear is the story. How did we get to the point where they're seeking advice, and what are they hoping to achieve from seeking advice?
This is a really good question. Tell me your story, because you'll probably get a lot of different people taking that a few different ways, as in, I grew up and blah blah blah, and our money was tough and money was this, but it's all of these things then become your understanding of how they're going to behave under pressure.
Exactly, yeah. So I actually prefer it when they start answering like that rather than getting straight down to business. It's much easier to establish that trust when you start to hear about people's background and, find ways that you can identify with it and find some common ground there.
And it probably, they know that that's a topic that they know better than anybody else, right, as well.
That's right.
So that they're the expert in that topic when it comes to the beginning of that meeting.
Yeah, and it really does help people relax and then start to think along the lines that you want them to be thinking, which is, really in that first meeting for me, it's all about them. In fact, the stuff that we have in our welcome pack that we send out beforehand says this whole financial planning process, the top of it is, it's all about you. Yep. It's not about us, it's about you and what you want to achieve. And so from that tell us your story conversation, I'll generally, find some questions I want to ask for them to elaborate, and we'll get into a little bit of the financial stuff. But then I explain some of the concepts that we've already been through in their welcome pack, about how we look at money. And how we look at different stages or areas of financial planning and where that fits into different lifestyles. So I don't spend very long talking about that at all. It's just kind of a brief introduction to begin with. And then the point of what I'm looking to achieve is I do a thing with all of my clients called a vision, mission, and action plan. And that's the point of the first meeting, is to fill that out. And really all that is their goals, what they have to work with, which they've already told me generally in the About You questionnaire that we've sent them out, which is the little mini fact find that we use through Astute Wheel. And then the strategies or the areas of advice that we can add value to help them achieve those goals. So it's really just, what are the goals? What are the areas that you need to think about? Where are you already well placed that you can maybe do yourself? And where are the areas that you're going to need some help?
Hey, these are really cool words: vision, mission, and action. I think to me, I'm obviously thinking vision is the vision is the goal, and the mission is the value, right? The underlying motivation behind the goal.
Correct. Yeah. And the what you've got to work with, what might be some of the roadblocks that are along the way, all of that sort of stuff. And
obviously with the roadblocks, we're talking about contingencies, right? We're talking about the fact that you can introduce the idea around, okay, well, if your goal is to, pay for your daughter's wedding, and then you end up having a heart attack and you don't have a contingency like a trauma insurance in place, then you might use your savings to pay for your pacemaker.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Yep. So the roadblocks can be all of that sort of stuff, but it's quite often it's also stuff that they haven't ever thought about. Like most people have got in their mind, insurance is an illness or injury is the biggest roadblock to them, but they don't think about things like, well, what happens if your parents get sick? Or what happens if your kids get sick? Or what happens if, your brother or sister develops a drug problem? Do you want to have funds set aside to help those people out, or how would that change your situation?
Yep. Yeah. Fantastic. So you can also, you do introduce a whole lot of different things that they haven't thought about then in that case.
That's exactly right.
And then I'm thinking the action plan really just comes back down to you saying, well, we can help you with the action plan in the next few meetings or the implementation of those with advice. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. It's really going through those 6 areas of advice and saying, look, I think we can improve your situation with, a super strategy here and a risk insurance plan there and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
So that all takes place in the following meetings. So just inside this discovery meeting, you've done some amazing work there. You've told this story. You've got some more information. You go through the vision, mission. Let's say vision, mission are the main parts of that.
Yep.
And then, and how do you finish that? And how do you leave that meeting from there?
Well, I suppose before that, the way that I do the goals is there's a great goals tool in Astute Wheel. So I'm using online software with them, so it's very visual. They can see, what it does is it brings in what they've put in as their raw objective, and it allows me to have the conversation and notarize the conversation about every goal that they've brought in. So that's become very important in this really compliance-driven world, that the goals we're delving into, but we're also getting a record of it. So that's really good. And then they have a document called an initial engagement. And that document basically sets out the areas of advice, and we just make a few ticks and crosses on it. It's something that I just print out in the meeting, make a few ticks and crosses on it as to the areas that we're going to review and cover, and whether there might be advice going forward, and what the fee is going to be for that.
Fantastic. And probably leads us into the next episode when we really talk about how to house these goals and have those conversations. So we might pick it up in the next episode.
Okay, excellent.
Welcome back to this episode, Kate Americano.
Thank you, Fraser. Thanks for having me.
Yes, you're welcome. Now, we're right in the middle of a conversation around, eliciting goals, eliciting values, getting the great questions that help clients actually understand what their values are. Understand what their goals might be, and put the really around the emotional side of it too throughout the discovery meeting. What have you seen with the advisors that you're working with that works well during the discovery meeting?
This is my actual favourite part of the meeting or the whole process, is because you actually get to ask the really the meaningful questions that can create quite a emotional response. So the ones that are doing it well, it doesn't need to be complicated. That's the first thing I would say. But what you do need to be able to do is to ensure that you take your time, create a really safe space for the clients to be able to respond, and just listen and show that you care in terms of that. So what I would say, there's a few different ways that advisors can do this. You can either use a values matrix and get the clients to go through the process and complete that. It's then the follow-up question, or you can use a pack of cards. I have been using, when I do my own values coaching, I use a pack of cards. Doesn't matter what they are, but a pack of values card. They've got also cool online, values things if you're a bit tech savvy and you want clients to do it that way. And you'll actually get different responses out of all three. So it depends how deep the advisor wants to go. The deepest and the best response that you'll ever get from a client, if you want to really know this, and this may be for your top clients, you may do the values-based conversation on your entire client base, but you may wish to actually personalize it for the top tier and do more of a one-to-one sort of coaching scenario. The reason that the difference between the two is when you do something like I've got like a values grid here. What you're getting is you're not getting to see what they're trading off, what values they're trading off. And there's enormous insight in that itself, right? So when you see somebody struggling, because this is a pack of like 56 cards, and when you see them struggling to find their trade off to 25, their trade off to 10, they get right down to the top 5. You get to see the way they make their decisions, right? And so how you then take that value is then how to take something from being just interesting and knowing your top 5 values to actually making it valuable is by asking these couple of questions after it. And the first thing is what is that definition of that value to you? Because even though that you and I might both pick a happiness value, how they define it is absolutely critical, because it's personal to everyone, and we'll all have a different response to it. So I asked them, first of all, to say, please, let's now that you picked the top 5 values, the first one is align the top 5 values in order of priority, right? And even in that can create an emotional response for people, because they can actually sit there and they might go, and particularly for mums that are kind of coming out with families, because they actually will sit there and they'll go, I actually want to be able to put myself first or try and do a bit of self-care, but I'm struggling with the trade-off between that and family and other things, right? And this is really important in terms of that mindset shift and being able to be the best to yourself and best to others and all the rest of it. So the first thing is obviously prioritize it 1 to 5 and then define it. And then I get them to rate it. I get them to rate it out of 10 and I say, so let's now look at it and how well you're actually living in alignment with that value. And they'll say, it's an 8 out of 10, it's a 5 out of 10, and so we get a really good sort of system around that. And then my follow-up question from that is, what's one action that you could take this year that will get, be greater in alignment, or that would help you to live more in alignment with that value? And that's when they go into the action around that. So, they actually detail, I could, for my health, I can be, walking every day and 10,000 steps a day, or for my finances, I can be putting away this, or for my relationships, I can spend some time on myself. And then the final thing is I actually, because 5 goals can sometimes be quite a lot. So I say, pick 3 goals out of those, 3 values out of those 5 that you just really want to focus on this year. And then we build that into a plan from the current you to future you and building that into alignment for them. So that process is like, you will know your client better than you've ever known them before. And it does, as I said, if you're doing the cards, it's really detailed, but financial planners don't have to do that. You can, even just knowing what their values are from this and then getting them to pick that and write the summary around it. Like you'll know so much more about your client and what really is important to them and their family.
Yeah, fantastic. Well said. So many great things to unpack in that. When you mentioned the values matrix, you were talking about a list, essentially a master list of a whole lot of different values, which anybody can Google, of course, and come up with a list of 50 or a list of 100 or a list of 20, whatever the number is. They're everywhere online. And that's just a prompter, the idea of just people going, that, circling, 10, 20 things on there going, these are all meaningful to me, that then you can chunk down into prioritizing.
Yeah, absolutely. And from taking it from being interesting to valuable to the client is then asking those follow-up questions. And that's what people pay for, Fraser. That's the difference for going from being a, kind of free service. And because, as you say, you can Google, these are not new tools. Anywhere on the web, you can grab them off the internet and incorporate any of that into your process, or even, I've made a combination of my favorite ones that keep on coming up from the different sessions. So that's how I've made mine.
And of course, so that really is finding a tool, but also putting a process in place to go through the tool.
Yes.
Because I think the tool alone is one thing, but you actually need to make sure that you have a process or an agenda or whatever it might be that you actually force you to go through that process.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. I love the idea of, then going through the deeper questions. What does that mean to you? What specifically does that mean to you, this thing? So you're getting in the client words, and then going back to out of 10, rating it back out of 10. How important is this that you achieve this? One of the great things that I've had in the past, around this is the thing called the $100 game, where you've got $100 and you've got $10 notes, and you have to put the money in each bucket. Let's say three goals, and the only thing is you can't put the same amount of money in each one. And you can't have less than $10, and then that then forces people to put the money in. And then of course you can look at their diary and say, well, does that? If I looked at your diary, is that what it says?
Yeah, awesome.
If I looked at your spending habits, is that what come out?
Yeah.
There's some great stuff around that. Kate, we're going to have to catch you in the next episode. This has been really, really great. I really appreciate you adding to this episode.
Pleasure. Thanks, Fraser.
Welcome back to episode 3 of our 6-part series. Tim.
How are you, Fraser? Great to be back.
Tremendous. Yeah, thank you for coming back. We're talking about the discovery meeting. We've got some great stuff so far. Tell us about your discovery meeting.
Yeah, I really love the discovery meeting. It's one of those things, I think, as people that we are people. It's great meeting new people, and there's always something there that might surprise you or be of interest. But I think from a business point of view and wanting to do business with people, as I think we touched on in the previous segment, we're getting a lot of great data through initially for that discovery meeting, and it allows us really to go into the meeting, with a much better view of probably who we're going to be sitting with and what their needs are. One of the things that I really value at the moment with the system we use is that we do like a small 5-minute health. It's called a 5-minute health check. That's with Astute Wheel, and that sometimes the simplest things are the most powerful. That simply just takes people 5 minutes to fill in, and it really is how are they feeling in these 6 areas. And it stands out starkly. They're really comfortable in some areas and really uncomfortable in others. So, great place to start your discussion with them is tell us about this survey and how you filled it out and why those areas are red and on high alert and these areas are in green. Yep. Sit back and hear what they've got to say, because that's really at the crux of it, why they've come to see you.
Yep. Now, we've had some of our other guests talk about the idea of husband and wife or partner and partner, and not allowing them to do it together. Do you also subscribe to that?
In the survey, you mean?
Yeah, like give them do it separately. Yeah.
I haven't subscribed to that. I could sort of understand why people might at that stage in the game, and it is interesting, studying people. It's probably a bit presumptuous to think that one party's more powerful or, they've got more control than the other. I think we'd probably start to work that out through the meeting and encourage both to play an active role. But generally they fill it out together and I would always ask them, do these reflect your feelings as well?
Yeah. Who filled this out?
Yeah, that's right.
Is that
exactly.
both? Yeah. Now, just on this, the practicality of your discovery meeting, how long does it go for? How long do you book in?
We book in 90 minutes. It normally wouldn't run for 90, but it definitely runs more than an hour. So I reckon the average one would go about 70 to 75 minutes.
Yep. And you mentioned your thing is around the concept of life planning or life first.
Yep.
Tell us about what that means to you.
For me, I think it starts with, you've obviously got the health check that's telling you what's really on their mind. And then I think the next stage of that is, what do you value in life? So what are their values? And really starting to uncover that. As a general rule, we don't at this stage do a values questionnaire, but we do have that coming up. So that's being developed and we'll be doing that later this year, possibly through that process. But I've done a lot of work on values over the time, and we've got our Dreamcatcher program that we do. 90% of people have these 3 values really, really high up. When you start with 20 values and say narrow it down, and they then narrow it down to 3, 90% of people are going to end up with health, family, and financial well-being. And so I generally talk to them about those things as a general rule in the meeting and hear what they've got to say. Because health, talking to them about their values around health, they're going to start to tell you things about what they like, are they active people, what are their hobbies, what are they passionate about. Talk about their family, things like education of their kids and what's important for us being parents or having a family. We really want to have a family, or we really don't want to have a family, or this is what's important to us on that level. And then with their finances, I think that then becomes, what does financial success look like to you? And starting to hear from them what they believe that is.
Yep.
Without getting too bogged down in the finances, just getting them to articulate what it means to them.
Fantastic. Excellent. So you take the approach of you really looking at the bucket level of values, the larger level of values, and saying, let's just without pigeonholing them into one set of values or another, you just ask them to comment on each area.
Well, I wouldn't even frame these up as saying I'm now talking to you about health or I'm now talking to you about your family, but in my head, they're the questions I'm going to ask them.
Yep.
How do you feel about what sort of life are you wanting to give your kids, or is education private education important to you? Or it's really just exploring in those. I explore in those buckets.
Yep. Excellent. So in your head, you're going through those different areas and you end up getting a lot of stuff out of them.
I think that, and then later on down the track, we will start to fine tune their values if they're wanting to put other things out on the table. But I think we know that they're three pretty solid ones to start with.
Yep, fantastic. And you mentioned life planning. Does that include life stage planning?
Well, I think from a financial point of view, we have to apply that because certain things are on the horizon for people at different stages of life. Again, we probably where it's appropriate. Of course, we'd preempt that. If they're nearly 60, we're going to start saying, well, you're coming up for retirement and these windows are going to open for you with super and that sort of thing. But otherwise, we'd probably let them steer it to some degree. But of course, you can't help. Sort of, you don't want to pigeonhole people, but you're going to a little bit, aren't you, with those life stages?
Yep. Now, a big chunk of this meeting is the emotional side of it. How deep do you go into getting goals out of people and understanding what the parameters of those goals might be in this discovery meeting?
Well, the system that we're using does an awesome job of that. So it asks them to list their goals, and we've also got some of the data and how they're feeling. So it becomes just a good initial template to expand on that. So in most cases, they're only going to give you one line, like I want to pay off my mortgage. So then it just gives us something to talk about to say, well, tell us what that means to you and tell us what this means to you and tell us what, again, we're just each time I think it's just building on that goal and possibly introducing other goals that they mightn't have thought about.
Yep, fantastic. Tell us what this means to you. Great question. Tim, thanks for catching up in this episode. There's plenty to go through the discovery, and I know that you and I could talk about it for hours and hours, but unfortunately we don't have the time. In the next episode, we're going to come back and talk about putting those goals into qualitative and quantitative measures, and then to be able to look at what how do we house them and have those goal conversations. So cool. We'll catch you in the next episode.
Yeah.
Welcome back to this episode, Michael Topper.
Thanks very much, Fraser. Looking forward to it.
Thanks for being here. Now, in this episode, we're talking about client discovery meetings and the amazing meeting that takes place where advisors really get to talk to their clients about their hopes, dreams, goals, aspirations, and values, and all those sorts of things. What are you seeing in this space?
Well, it's really interesting. If you look at goals just generally with people, about 3% of people have goals set, and that's through numerous studies, mainly in the US and in Europe. And out of 100% of people, only 1% have written them down. So it seems to be quite a foreign concept to clients to have goals, given that so few actually do. And it'd be interesting to find out what kind of percentage of financial advisors have set goals. So that might be something for the people listening in on this. Have you got your goals? Have you written them down? And are you tracking them? It's a foreign concept to a client. And if you just send them a blank sheet of paper, say, please write down your goals, you're going to get a blank sheet of paper back. But that's the one end of the spectrum. You can't go to the other end, which is, here's a bunch of goals, tick the ones that are these products that I can sell to you, because that's pushing it too far. So you've got to get a happy medium between the two. And so what we found has worked really well before having the actual discussion about goals is to get a client to think about that at home as part of the questionnaire that they get. So they can either get a goals questionnaire on its own or can be part of the About You questionnaire. And you provide them with prompts that are 3 to 5 words. Go on a holiday, buy a house, those kind of prompts. And that then helps the client frame what it is that they want to do. So if they want to go on holiday, you then ask them in the tool, is this a high, medium, or low priority? It might be high. And is it short, medium, or long term? So when do you want to do it? And if you can help clients get their head around those aspects, they've already generated 2/3 of their goal. And then the last thing that we ask them to do is to say, what does this goal mean to you? So one of the requirements from ASIC is that the client's voice has to come through loud and clear. You can't have a cookie cutter approach. Here's 50 goals, choose the ones you like, and here's the SOA that you get. It's got to be, what is your goal? What does it mean to you? Why do you want to do it? And that's the, I guess, the tool that can help the client actually provide those. So what we're finding is that a lot of advisors are getting really good goals coming through. Now they need work, but at least they've had a great attempt, and at least it's not a blank sheet of paper.
Yep, exactly. Now, so many things you just said then I could unpack. I want to start with the concept of what that is. It needs some work, because that was a really interesting comment you threw in at the end. I think what happens in a lot of, compliance sort of see this too is goals tend to be very much, this person wants to review their risk. Okay, great. That's a goal. Well, that kind of feels like a strategy to me. We've sort of jumped and put that down as a goal. The client wants to do this strategy as their goal. But you also mentioned in that last little piece around the concept of, what it is, what it means to them specifically or personally, and why they want to do that. And to me, that's obviously we've talked a bit in this series and with other guests around the idea around values and understanding that the goals and the values are aligned together.
Yeah. So, with the goal and where the conversation needs to go from when the client's done their attempt at their goal and say they've got it 50% to 60% of the way there, the value that the advisor adds is, do you really want to do this? Does it conflict with other goals? So if you're going to buy a $100,000 BMW, it means that your mortgage is going to last a few years longer, and you said you really wanted to knock that over. So which one is it? So you want to look at goals that conflict, but also help the client make their goal and turn it into a SMART goal. So, the client's goal might be, we want to go overseas. That's their goal. And the reason it's important to them, so the other bit that they added in is, my kid's in year 11, and so we want to go this year. It's the last time we can really do a family holiday with the kids before they fly the coop. So that then becomes a high priority. They want to do it in the next 12 months or whatever. But then to add it and to turn it into more of a SMART goal. And that's what you do face-to-face with the client, whether that's via Zoom or in a face-to-face meeting. But it's making the goal more robust, so it's more measurable and achievable, and to see whether it is achievable and realistic, because sometimes people have goals that aren't realistic and they need someone to go, hey, I think this one may be out of touch, out of reach.
Yeah, exactly right. There's so much we can get into that. Obviously, yeah. My ideas around this is, having that like the SMART goal is important. Having that idea that thing, then putting some parameters around it, putting some milestones around it, then understanding if it's achievable, and then making it specific and measurable and all those types of things, which is really important. And then allowing the client to go, okay, I can see this is going to happen at that time in the future, and then allowing them sort of come back to now to work out what all the little stepping stones are along the way, and then it becomes a belief that this is what's going to happen, and they work themselves towards it. And in a way, I think their advisor's role is to give the client the permission to do that as well.
Yeah, exactly. And, there was a practice, and I'll give them a bit of a plug, called Goals and Dreams, and they're up in Queensland. And they work with people that don't necessarily have the means to go overseas. It's kind of a foreign thing to that group of clients that they have. And they had a dreams board up in their foyer to their office. And what they would ask clients to do is, we'll help you go on an overseas trip, but you have to send us a postcard, and so we can stick that up on the dreams board. So when other new clients came in and they said, look, if one of the things they want to do is to go overseas, well, that's achievable. Let's go and look at some of those postcards. These are all our clients that couldn't necessarily go overseas, but these are the fantastic holidays they've been on, so it helps them get their head around that. And I think the second thing is, if you're going to have a framework to help a client figure out what their goals are, when they get that information back to you, you also need to think what's missing. And so that's where this feeling find or 5-minute health check becomes really powerful, because they may have put down in the 5-minute health check that they're really concerned about their insurance, but they don't have that as a goal. So when you have a discussion with a client about you're concerned about your insurance, why? Well, I want to make sure that if I pass away, my wife's got enough money to pay off the house and blah, 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 and they tell you what that is, then that's fine. The conversation then becomes, should that also be a goal? Let's add it to your goals, and that's to get the right insurances in place. So a goals tool isn't going to encompass everything. The advisor needs to be a bit aware of what should be on there that isn't, and have that discussion and add it as a goal.
Yeah, I think when the way I view that is around the idea of contingency, and every single goal what would stop this goal from happening? What's the obstacles going to be? Is it, it could well be that parents are, going into aged care, or that there's something else going on. I'm not going to make that time. It could be that, you don't have your estate planning sorted out and something happens to one of you, then that might not be achievable. It could be that you don't have your risk in place and that, you have a heart attack and you're going to spend your money on the pacemaker, not the holiday, or whatever it might be. There's a lot of ways I think that we can look at contingencies around goals that then lead to the idea of what's a strategy to that we can put in place that, covers that.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing that you mentioned is values. And so if 3% of people have goals and 1% have written them down, guess how few have got their values sorted out? So there aren't that many tools around to help people understand their values. There are playing cards that you can purchase and you can go through with a client, and that seems to work pretty well for some advisors. But we recently have built a values tool to help clients get their head around their values. And the value of the values tool is that it kind of keeps the client honest, and it gives them a view of what their values are in priority order. And once you have your values sorted, it makes decisions easy, because all decisions get measured against your values. And if they're in conflict with your values, you don't do them. And it also helps the advisor keep the client honest, because the client might say, the most important thing to me that's right at the top of the pile of my values is family. You go, are you sure? Yes. Well, how come you don't have insurance? So either your value is wrong, and you've said that it's really important to you that your family is looked after, but that's conflicting the fact that you don't have insurance. What happens if you die tomorrow? So do we change your value because it's not correct and money is more important because you don't want to pay for insurance? Or do we add insurance to your goals? And that becomes a very powerful conversation to have with clients as well.
Yeah, it certainly is. And I having been through a lot of work over the last sort of couple of years on values and understanding how to, it's not that easy eliciting your own values. And my challenge is out there to any advisor listening to this, go ahead and try and work out what your own values are. And sometimes it's not an easy exercise to just dive in and there they are. Sometimes it actually takes a lot of time. I know from personal view, I sort of thought, my values are this. And then really diving deeper and deeper, I've sort of worked out that they're kind of that as well, but this other thing, and this is actually more important. So it wasn't an instant gratification moment where you just go, here they are. It was a bit of a work in progress for me personally.
Yeah, now they are tough to get your head around. And what's interesting is in family dynamics is that quite often, say, a husband and wife were going to come up with 5 or 7 values. There'd probably be an overlap of 3 or 4, so 3 or 4 that are the same. But what really is interesting to them is that their values are in a different order. So what's my number one value may not be what your number one value is, and that's great. So get them to do that exercise separately and then come together and say, we've got 10 values between us. Let's come up with an order which is in the correct order. And we did this quite a few years ago, probably 2010, as a family with our kids. And kids actually figure out values a lot more easily than adults. They nail it quite quickly. But if you do produce something like your values and frame it and stick it up on a wall, your kids can call you up on things. Hey, Dad, you said that this is an important value to you, and why didn't you come to my netball game? Those kind of things. And that's what they're there for. That's it's a good exercise.
I 100% agree, and I love the comment. I was speaking to somebody a few years ago, and they said, "Well, that's great. If those are your values, that's excellent. But if I look in your diary, would it say that? Is that what your diary would say to me? Is that what if I looked at your calendar over the last month and looked at your appointments? Is that exactly what is coming through?" So,
yeah, there's a great saying: "Show me your calendar and your checkbook, and I'll tell you what your values are."
Fantastic. Let's leave it at that. That's an amazing session, that a discovery meeting, and we'll catch you in the next episode when we're talking about housing goals and having advice conversations around them. Thanks, Michael.
Fantastic.